Shall we continue? We shall. Chapter 140. We are back in the castle where Nami is being treated by Dr. Kuriha. We get a little reminder of Usopp's swollen face for some reason, which is pretty funny. So Luffy's trying to get Dr. Kuriha to join his crew. She's much too young to consider such a thing. Luffy and Sanji continue to basically stalk Tony Chopper to make stew out of him. You get a little bit of a view of the castle, which is totally other than the room they're in, I guess, pretty much taken care of or just abandoned. It's full of snow. Nami actually ends up trying to recruit Tony Chopper, and it looks like he's actually pretty interested. He's emphatically claiming he's not. He's got some kind of hang up about living with humans. Can't live with humans, obviously. And also he has a blue nose, which ultimately is meaning he can't live with reindeers either. So he has no place, maybe other than where he's at. We get some backstory about the whole blue nose thing and being made fun of. He basically has Rudolph's backstory, but with a blue nose. Then he eats the devil fruit, and his human characteristics can get him even further cast out of reindeer society. Then he goes to try to live with the humans. He looks like a giant, basically the abominable snowman, which is what they think he is. And he can't fit there. They just think he's a monster. So you have the Frankenstein thing going. You got the Rudolph thing going on the other side. He has some trauma, which is why he's refusing to join the pirates. Meantime, while Luffy and Sanji are sort of trying to catch him, they see him become the bigger version of himself, makes him more interesting, and then ultimately they see that he's trying to prevent them from killing a nest of baby birds. Realize finally that he's not necessarily just food. And then Luffy, as a result, wants to recruit him. Just as that happens, Walpole makes it back, and another doctor from Tony Chopper's past is mentioned. Chapter 141, Quack Doctor. Just quickly, we go back to the village where Zoro and Vivi are really took out the guards, and so they get to unbury Dalton, or they're about to unbury Dalton. From there, we go back to Dr. Kuriha in the castle, where Tony Chopper lets her know Walpole's back. Then Dalton comes up. They find him. Then we start cutting back and forth much more rapidly here. This is kind of new. And then we cut back to Walpole arriving at the castle. But he sees a flag flying. It's a pirate-related flag. And it turns out Dr. Kuriha turned the castle into a mausoleum for Dr. Hurlook, who we're about to find a lot more out about. Then we go back and they get Dalton up. But apparently he's dead. I don't know if he's really dead, but apparently he's dead. And we go back to Walpole at the castle, and Luffy comes out and is about to punch him in the face. And that's when we get a flashback. A very long flashback. This flashback is, it's the 6 years earlier. It's the tale of Drum Kingdom. And you meet Dr. Hurlook, who is not very good. And in fact is accidentally killing people with his cures and killing other people apparently. And he's got this pirate symbol on his bag, the skull and crossbones, which is something else in medicine, right? He's after a cure-all, but it's not working. In fact, quite the opposite. You get to see sort of a comparison between Dr. Hurlock and Dr. Kuriha. And while Dr. Kuriha is definitely a more effective doctor, like traditional, I don't know, more traditional doctor and more effective traditionally. Dr. Kuriha is like more about money. At least she says she is. Whereas Hurlock's actually trying to come up with a cure so that people won't need doctors at all anymore, basically, is what he's really trying to do. Cure for everything, a cure-all. Dr. Hurlock, on his way, I guess, home from his most recent failure, runs into Tony Chopper, as he's recently been driven off and wounded, gravely wounded probably, by the humans he was trying to approach and live with. Short version, Dr. Hurlock saves him. And this becomes important. He says, "I'd never shoot you like the other humans did." Does actually kind of nurse him back to health, and that begins at the end of the chapter. Chapter 142, Skull and Cherry Blossoms. We find out that actually Dr. Hurlock names Tony Chopper Tony Chopper because he's a Tenakai, which is a reindeer, and he's got fine antlers that look like they could chop down trees, hence Tony Chopper. Go back to Walpole, back when he was the ruler, and where Dalton was still part of his security, or the captain of his security. See Dalton being disillusioned with how things are going. And apparently there was a previous king that was much, very different and better by Dalton's standards. And Dalton has a flashback within this flashback. And we get to see the scene where Vivi was in this area with her, I guess, father, or Princess Vivi's there for the summit, or the meeting, the council. Walpole hits her, actually. But instead of starting something, she decides to play it down. And that gets missed by Dalton in that moment, that she was a better ruler / politician than Walpole, or most people probably in general, because she chose to not escalate things in that moment, even as a young child. So she made an impression then. Interesting. I guess that didn't really come up before that he remembered that. Or maybe he did. I don't know. This is written after that, so who knows. Then we go back to Dr. Hurlock and Chopper. He relates a story of a guy who was miraculously healed just by seeing cherry blossoms. So that's when we find out his plan is basically to be able to recreate this here in his hometown, our homeland. But it's very cold in his homeland, so it's very difficult to grow cherry blossoms. And that's what his plan is to find a way. Because this man, who turns out to be him, had an incurable disease, saw cherry blossoms, and was miraculously healed. Therefore, this has to be the cure-all for everybody. Some kind of principle, he thinks, of a powerful emotion is enough to change a person's body. Which, hey, there's some evidence of that to some degree. Not to this degree, I don't think. But that's what his plan is, and part of why he's the kind of doctor he is. But he takes the skull and crossbones as a symbol of faith. He wants, and also he likes the relationship to the pirates, so that's why he used that symbol. It rejects impossibilities, so he will hoist the flag and fight like a pirate. And so he explains pirates to Tony Chopper. So this is how we know for sure that Tony Chopper has some kind of respect for pirates. But that'll get complicated shortly with the whole skull and crossbones thing and what it means in this context and what it means in a different context. This is where they have a conversation about a mushroom that only grows on this island that might be useful, which is important that idea gets put into Tony Chopper's head. They head into town to try to help somebody, but Dr. Hurlock's reputation precedes him, and they're basically thrown out. And he actually throws Tony Chopper at them as a decoy to get away. So that it's also some kind of insight into how inconsistent this guy basically is. I don't know how else to put it. He's just kind of crazy, right? But this all gets turned to positive. This is where the hat comes from. Here, there's a little bit of a montage. A year goes by. Tony Chopper is well and wearing the hat, and the doctor decides to throw him out. In order to get rid of him and scare him off, he actually shoots at him, which is something he said he would never do, which is the only thing basically that he figured would get him to go away and stay away. That's really sad. Those moments in general in stories are always really sad. So chapter 143, Clumsy. This is where we find out he's dying. He's only got a few days left. The doctor, Hurlock, is dying. He's meeting with Dr. Kuriha about this. And that's why he decided he had to scare off Tony Chopper. he didn't want him to have to watch his mentor die in front of him. He decided it'd be better to break his promise and shoot at him to scare him away. I don't know. But that's what happened. This is when you find out the Cherry Blossom story is actually about him. And Dr. Kuriha basically is able to give him a few weeks. Because otherwise he was gonna die in 4 days at 5:30 p.m. But she can fool his body for 3 weeks, apparently. So he basically threatens to shoot her in order to get her to do it for free, to treat him for free. So Tony Chopper overhears that he's sick and decides to go find that mushroom. I'm assuming he might have heard that part too, where he understands why Dr. Hurlock did what he did. So he goes out on his own to try to find this mushroom. And he also finds, in the process, he runs into a pack of reindeer that he has to go through. So he tries to just walk through them normally, is what it looks like. And they are offended by that, I guess. And they end up fighting, actually. And they headbutt each other. These two headbutt each other, or he headbutts him, but he headbutts them back, it looks like. He's beaten up a little bit, but he finds the mushroom that he's looking for. And it takes him a week, apparently, to get back. I don't really understand. There's a panel here. I'm missing something. Once he finds the mushroom, there's a chasm he needs to get across to get at it. And he's not sure how he's going to get across. And then the next panel, the reindeer coming up behind him. And then it just cuts to 1 week later. And I don't see anything that tells me what happened. But we see that somehow, with the chasm in front of him and the angry reindeer behind him, he made it across and back within a week. And he's totally beat up, missing part of an antler. His hat's messed up, but he's there with this mushroom. And he asked to be taught to become a doctor. Dr. Hurlock. He wants Dr. Hurlock to live. Dr. Hurlock tells Chopper, of course you can be a doctor. You've got the most important qualification, a big heart. Meanwhile, Walpole is after Dr. Hurlock anyway, it looks like. So he's a criminal. I don't know. Or he's also not one of the, 20 doctors. He's one of the rogue doctors. Chapter 144, Snowtail. And they make soup out of the mushrooms. He says it's terrible, but he's feeling better already. And somehow at that point, he gets the reaction he's looking to related to the cherry blossoms. So he's completed his work, but he's dying. So he decides to take his results to Dr. Kuriha. He promises... there's something about the 20 doctors Walpole has are all sick, and there being a crisis, and... I guess Dr. Hurlock wants to cure them, and Dr. Kuriha is just saying ignore it, it'll go away. I'm missing that part of the story in my brain a little bit, the Walpole side of things. Dr. Hurlock goes to Dr. Kuriha to ask a favor, gives her the result of his 30 years of research. He considers the miracle cure that will heal the country, which is something to do about the cherry blossoms blooming. But I guess it's some bag of dust. They call it fairy dust here, with a question mark, though. So he wants her to finish the work that he's proven he can do, because he's not going to live long enough. And I guess whatever's in that bag is it's the beginning of it. It's going to help her do that. And then he's also asking her to teach medicine to Chopper. Of course, she's refusing, but she's pretending like all she cares about is... She doesn't really care, that she doesn't have a big heart and that doesn't have a kind heart, but really he knows that she does, so he knows asking her is gonna guarantee that she does take care of this. And then he goes off, I guess, in theory, all these people who need doctors and don't have them because all of the 20 doctors are all sick and they don't want Dr. Hurlock. And Dr. Kuriha takes a lot for what she does, right? And they're operating illegally anyway, right? So Dr. Kuriha realizes that he might be up to something stupid, I guess, and goes looking for him at his house, which is where Tony Chopper is. She finds out that they made the tea out of that mushroom to help him. And while he's on his way, that's where we realize that mushroom's actually poisonous. And I guess Tony Chopper didn't realize it because in the book, medicine book, there's the skull and crossbones on it, but he didn't realize that means poison because he related it to the whole pirate flag thing and the nothing's impossible mentality. So he didn't realize that basically he's ensured that Dr. Hurlock's going to die sooner rather than later, where you see the difference between Dr. Kuriha and Dr. Hurlock. And you see that Dr. Kuriha actually cares because there's tears in her eyes, saying a kind heart alone won't save lives. There's no such thing as a miracle cure. She is going to train him, basically. And so he knows, apparently Dr. Hurlock knows he's off to die, so he's on like a suicide mission, basically. I guess that they set that up as a way to draw him in anyway. Doctors weren't really sick, that's what's actually happening, right? Yeah. Dr. Hurlock showed up to save the doctors. And that's the end of the chapter. And that's the end of the next 5 chapters, right? 40, 41, 42, 43, 44. So the next 5 are going to be right here. So let's go there and get through this.